Boom. All right. Let's see. Hopefully that sounds better.
Yeah, hopefully that's better. Did we fix it?
Yes. Anybody
Nice.
out there? How do we sound?
Oh.
Hello.
Yep, we got comments.
Derek, Sarah, how does this sound? Good? Let me know. All right. So either
anyway,
way. Yeah.
sorry about that.
It's
So
all
that
good.
let's a quick review. We're up to the 16-year-old suicide of a close friend.
Yep.
Yes. Which I was talking about, like trauma.
The trauma.
You know, the trauma is what.
Trauma.
Not good again. Sounds weird. Sounds weird. Focus right.
Chris, she's saying now go.
Any better? Still weird.
No way. It's got to be Facebook or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Muffled, someone said. I can still understand you, though. Thank you, Kellyanne Manning.
All right. Well,
yeah, I don't know what's going on.
doesn't make any sense. So it's muffled.
What is different on any of our stuff?
No, our stuff is the same as normal.
Yeah.
Well, you might have to just go with it.
Yeah.
Really don't know.
Because it sounded good on the computer.
Sounds great on the audio recording. So
I turned us down on here. Focus right.
all right, and we're registering all good signals.
Yeah. So all right.
So anyway,
Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, 16-year-old me. I thought I had the world figured out, and essentially one day, I realized, life was going to show up. I didn't really know how to deal with it, and I pretty much turned to alcohol to deal with it.
booze.
Yep.
All right.
So I was really raised, to really stay away from hard drugs. What were called hard drugs at the time,
you
right?
were warned against.
So yes, I was warned against. My father had a lot of friends, an extended family who were in the program and stuff. I was more of the friend that gave my friends a hard time if they went towards anything besides marijuana and alcohol.
Right.
But with that, really, I had a family member, pass away in a homicide a few months later, and
Wow.
pretty much kind of all the lines that I had drawn towards like hard stuff pretty much went out the window, and I just kind of turned to anything and everything to get out of myself.
Yeah. To get rid of those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Lines can be tough.
Yeah.
I'm a habitual line stepper myself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. Habitual line stepper. Yes. So am I. So now, who was it in your family?
It was my dad's cousin, but I'm from a really close-knit family. It was pretty much like an uncle to me.
Yeah. Right. And did anything ever happen? Anything come about?
No, it was actually Thanksgiving week. It went unsolved for a very long time. It finally, like a year or two went by, and they finally figured some things out, and but it got classified as kind of a self-defense thing, and no one was ever really held accountable.
So now you started with the harder stuff.
Yep. So I pretty much turned to whatever got put in front of me. I mean, at the time, it was really I was starting to get into like club drugs, cocaine, ecstasy. But I mean, alcohol was still at the time my primary thing that I turned to really
Get out of yourself.
numb myself out. Yep.
Yeah. I that's when I really started going down too. When I had to stuff feelings with it, and they just kept coming back up. So I would just use and use and use. It's a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah.
Every time. So what age is this now? Is it still 16?
So yeah, I carried on through high school. I acted out a lot. I got in, I got violent as a teenager and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All looking back, it's funny when I entered treatment this time, right? I look back and I thought alcohol wasn't an issue in my life, because
Really?
as opioids entered my life, everything came second to that, right? So
Yeah.
for the last 7 years of my life, I barely even drank because essentially every penny I had went to an opioid painkiller.
Right. That's the way I was too. Yeah.
So I convinced myself somewhere along the line that alcohol is not really an issue, but when I really started to work a program and reflect, so much any of the trouble that I got in as a teenager, any of the chaos that was in my life was pretty much all alcohol fueled,
Yeah.
and because of alcohol abuse.
It's like setting yourself on fire, man, and it's like a temporary thing. Like if trauma happens, and you were to learn how to deal with the feelings, it's somewhat temporary. I mean, you're never completely the same,
Mm-hmm.
but the horrible, the worst of the pain is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of just learning and going through it and growing, we set ourselves on fire. It's like we don't realize what we're doing, but it's a trap.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what did you end up going into any college or?
Yeah, so fast forward, right? I graduated from Boston Latin School. I went on to Assumption College in Worcester.
But you're doing
So I'm still,
ecstasy.
yeah,
and all
I'm
this shit.
partying.
Yeah.
So back then, nothing was red flaggy to me.
Right.
My ignorant self back then, right?
Right.
But I entered college, and my roommate was heavily into opioid painkillers. And I still kind of shied away from it, right? Essentially, I grew up with a lot of older kids, and
Right.
Oxycontin hit, and essentially I saw what happened.
Yeah.
And pretty much, I had a healthy fear at the time of it, so I still strayed away from it. But when I was a freshman in college, had my wisdom teeth pulled, had some a prescription. My friend told me that I should try and not use them all, use Motrin 800 so that I could save some for afterwards, right? That it would be cool to take it with alcohol, that would amplify the effects. And I did that, and I say at the time, right, that was the veil of fear of drugs essentially went out the window, right? Because here I was taking an opioid painkiller, and my life didn't end, so it didn't have a drastic effect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, what's all this fear and craziness that everyone's talking about that's related to this stuff,
Right.
And honestly, that small little decision, that small prescription has forever changed my life.
Altered your life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like they say about certain things, the worst thing that can happen is if you don't get caught.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So next time,
Yeah, right. So yeah, this
fast forward, you're gonna scream and have it.
yeah, this sound thing's got me all over the place trying to
Flustered.
figure it
It's
out.
all good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that progressed, right? My roommate had I came back in.
Yeah,
my
there we
roommate
go.
had ease of access to it. I pretty rapidly developed a habit. But it's funny, at this time in my life, right, I was at college in Worcester, but a lot of my friends didn't go to college. So I didn't want to go to college.
Right.
I was looking like I wanted to
I'm
be.
gonna miss out.
Yeah, I wanted to be like the townie and not go to college. I thought my life would just be like, my dad had a carpentry company that I would just work in the field and stuff.
Right.
So when I went to school, I felt out of place because I had these lifelong friends and everything that were partying every weekend back home. So I felt out of place at school. I was coming home every weekend, but then at this time, the disease of addiction did start to affect my family. My father was an alcoholic, and so while I was in college and summer breaks and stuff, my home life started to not be so much home anymore either. So I really felt emotionally uncomfortable everywhere I was, right?
Yeah, right.
And I slowly discovered that opioid painkillers essentially flatlined my emotions, right? So anxiety, depression, fear of the unknown, lack of confidence, all of that went out the window when I used an opioid painkiller.
Yes, it takes everything away. Like,
Yep.
it just makes everything comfortable, everything bearable.
Mm-hmm.
You just forget about everything that bothers you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing. You don't like what's going on. So instead of actually trying to change anything,
Mm-hmm.
you just take a pill.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trick of the brain, though, too,
Yeah.
right? It's the ultimate coping mechanism. So, I could take some deep breaths to calm anxiety, but once it's got its hooks in me, right, my brain, consciously or unconsciously, is like, why should we go through these steps that might work?
Right.
When I know the ultimate numbing
when we
agent.
know exactly.
When we know what the pure coping mechanism is, right? Because so that's what painkillers were for me, was essentially the ultimate painkiller, right? It killed pain, emotional
Yes.
pain in
Emotional
my
pain.
life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It gets rid of everything, and
Dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter. Like, no matter what you're going through, fear, anger, whatever, it's just like whoosh,
Gone.
see you later.
Mm-hmm.
It's someone that
Until it doesn't.
Until it doesn't.
Until
Yes.
it doesn't. Right. Until those feelings like boil, and like push through everything. Like, it
Right.
got to the point for myself that it didn't matter how much stuff I did anymore. It just everything just kept bubbling to the surface. and,
Exactly.
I couldn't keep it down anymore.
You could pretend like you weren't feeling any bad feelings for about 15
Yep.
minutes right after you get high, and then all of a sudden you're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
this sucks.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing with the fentanyl now too, because it's like such a short acting thing that
Yep.
people have to get high more and more.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doesn't, like, the lasting effect of the high is way shorter.
No shit.
Yeah, so that's why people are injecting more and more. And
That's why they're putting it in everything.
yeah,
know.
that blows my mind.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a skip. We have guys that participate at Social Peer Recovery who are not opioid users
Right.
and have overdosed on fentanyl using cocaine. You
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
having
Crazy.
a Narcan, so.
That's crazy. So you just talked about social peer recovery.
Yep.
So now you go through all your addiction stuff and you move on through your life and
Yep.
end up getting.
Well, so hold on. Don't want to
Okay.
fast forward too
All right.
much, right?
All right.
So,
Yeah.
so life was kind of out of control. I graduated college. I got a job in investment banking in downtown Boston. I showed up to work in a suit and a tie, dressed up every day, and fully addicted to painkillers, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I laugh, to myself now, because I'd be walking with coworkers and stuff in downtown Crossing, and they'd be, making comments about the junkies on the corner asking for change, or these bums and all this stuff. When realistically, I was the full-blown addicted individual, right, walking down the street in a suit. And I think
Right.
that's
you just hadn't got to that point.
yeah. So
yet
I mean,
in
I
the
think that's
progression.
also a big thing about today, about the crisis that we have, about what's really going on, is that it's everywhere, right? I've worked in treatment. I've seen people from every profession, right? Everyone cites all these statistics and stuff, but this isn't like a statistical problem. Like, I'm someone's brother. I'm someone's son. I'm your
Right,
banker.
right.
That's
I'm your
right.
neighbor.
And
and people have no idea.
And you go through life, and it's progressive, and it gets worse.
Yep.
And you might have been the investment banker
Oh, yeah.
at 23, and if
Right.
you had kept on going, you might have been the homeless bum
Oh, yeah. I
at
would have been,
33.
yes.
You know what I mean, or
Yep.
sooner.
Right.
Right?
That's if you survived it.
Yes.
You know
You
what I mean?
survived.
So my life became this like crazy walking tightrope. left home after college. My family has like a 2-family house. I lived in one of the apartments, and the disease really started to rear itself and affect my family. Meanwhile, my addiction was completely a secret to everybody around me. My longtime girlfriend at the time, my whole family. There was so much focus on my father.
Oh yeah.
So my family was turning to me, right, to run interventions on my father, and essentially
little did they know,
force him to go to treatment. I'm the oldest son. Mark, you got to sit down, tell Dad he has to go to treatment. Little do they know that I'm going upstairs essentially and
so crazy,
using over the fact that I hate myself for being a hypocrite.
Oh, so
right?
in your quiet time by yourself, you knew that you should be going to treatment.
Oh yeah,
too?
oh yeah,
yeah.
And that's the self-reinforcing cycle of addiction, right? I was doing everything to keep the walls up and like keep my problems secret.
Yeah.
But then I just pile on the extra shame. I'm a liar. I'm a hypocrite. Right. I hate myself. So I'm going to go use over these feelings I want to get rid of. Right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to use drugs over the fact that I hate the fact that I use drugs. Right? Like there's this little line in one of the stories in the basic text that always stuck with me. It's I continued to turn to the source of my pain for comfort. Right? So I continued to turn to drugs for comfort when it was really the source of so much pain in my life.
Right. Well, it makes you a liar from the beginning because you can't tell your parents as a kid that you're drinking and using drugs.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to lie right
and
away.
Then it indoctrinates you into that identity.
Yep.
I'm a liar. That's what I do.
And so, my dad's struggles really had an effect on me. I got to preface by saying, though, that my dad is like my hero, the most important person in my life.
Today.
Yes, for always.
Fantastic.
So my father passed away 5 years ago.
Oh,
so my father, though, was everything I am today as a man. I credit to the amazing father that I had. Right. So despite all his struggles, I struggled a lot with, the self-centeredness of the disease, right? So I'm like, I was a bad kid, so my dad drinks. I didn't tell him I love him. I became obsessed over this time where I told him I hated him, and I had like nightmares that was the reason that he drank. And I used to pace around my room, paranoid that my dad was out and he wasn't going to come home. I was filled with anxiety and fear, and to handle all this stuff, I was turning more and more to drugs. In June 2014 was the last time January 2014, my dad came back home, and he had brief periods of success, which, were some of the best memories of my, recent life. Right. And, in April of 2014, my dad's dad, lung cancer, came back into his life, and he passed away. And he was kind of like the head of our family. It was traumatic. We were all in the room when he passed, but my dad really struggled with it. And, that was April 2014. And 4 months later, in August 2014, my dad, was drinking again, and he went out one night and he never came home, but I have to emphasize, right, my father never gave up, right? And so the last place that he was on this earth was actually at an AA meeting. He's on his way home from a meeting when he passed away. But
car accident.
Yeah, he got in a car accident, and that really obviously drastically changed my life.
Right.
And I used to have this idea. I would tell myself, I'm like, my father will finally get it when I tell him that I'm struggling with addiction, and we'll do this together. Right? And then I said, I'll tell him tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell him tomorrow. I'll tell him tomorrow. August 17th comes. I'll tell him tomorrow. And then August 18th comes, and there is no more tomorrow. Right? And so, wrongfully so when I look back, but I'm the guy who heaps all the burden on his own shoulders.
Right.
And I really blamed myself. Couldn't wrap my head around it. And, it launched me into a dark place. And, to emphasize, though, that, like, we become lost
know.
it.
Yeah, it's shut down. No idea why. So we can.
I'd say Facebook.
Yeah, there's something
is
going on
what's
with
going
Facebook
on.
tonight.
Yeah.
So we can just keep going for the audio,
Okay.
and I'll try and get this back up.
So to really, emphasize, like, today I understand that we become different people when we're under the influence of the disease of addiction. Right?
Absolutely.
So at the time, I struggled with my father was choosing alcohol, blah, blah, blah.
Choosing alcohol over
us,
over your family.
Today I realized that wasn't the case at all, and to emphasize that, the first thing, my mom and sister were in Cape Cod when I got the call that my father passed away. My little brother was up in bed asleep. And the first thing I did before waking him up, before calling my mom and sister to see how they were doing, the first thing I did was turn to a substance to deal with it, and that's not me at all, So I had to go under the influence. I was already under the influence. But, the first thoughts that I had were to turn to a substance to deal with it before I could, wake my brother up and give him a hug.
That's what we do. That's what we do. That's the normal reaction of an alcoholic addict, is to use. I mean, that's our coping mechanisms. And when you use over a long period of time, your other coping mechanisms, your natural ones, go away.
Yep, they go out the window.
Yeah. We are what we repeatedly do.
Yes.
Aristotle.
Yes.
So, my life spiraled out of control with that. A few months went by. It was actually my mom's birthday when I remember. So I was on opioid painkillers. In my head, I said, even though I'm doing double-digit amounts of oxycodone, I convinced myself in my denial that it was all good as long as I wasn't doing heroin,
Oh, yeah.
So I spent absurd sums of money to fuel my addiction. But I remember, it was my mom's birthday, December 29th, and I was walking home from the train. Every day I walked home from the train thinking the walls were done. I'm like, oh, today's the day I'm going to walk in and everyone's going to be sitting there waiting to call me out, right? And I used to...
Intervention style.
Yeah, I used to drive home from... So anyone familiar with Boston is... I used to work in downtown Crossing, right? And I used to get overdraft letters and credit card bills in the mail to my house, but I lived in the same house as my mom. So I'm I had it mapped out when these bills would arrive and when overdraft notices would arrive.
Oh my!
So it was, my life was insane. Talk about unmanageable. So I'm half-hour lunch break. I'm getting up at lunch, hopping on the Orange Line from downtown Crossing, taking it to Forest Hills, to get in my car, to drive to my house. And if the mail wasn't there, then I was driving around the block until I found the mailman. And I'm showing my ID going, hey, I got an important letter I'm waiting for. Can I grab it?
Every day.
Yeah, the guy used to
Every
just
day.
get ready when I would pull up. He'd just be
word.
pulling out my mail.
That's like, when, say, you're on unemployment and you're chasing the fucking mailman down
Oh,
every
yeah.
week. You know
And,
what I mean? Like,
it was
hey,
crazy.
Yeah.
And
So
Wow.
our broadcast was interrupted, and I put it back on, and I guess everything's fine now.
okay,
So-
awesome.
Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah. Of
So,
course,
It's a connection.
I was so my half-hour lunch breaks were turning into 2-hour
Chasing
lunch
down the
breaks,
mailman.
chasing
Yeah,
down the
exactly.
mailman to get overdraft notices out of the mail. And I remember December, I came home, and I couldn't get out of work that day for some reason. I couldn't leave during the middle of the day, and I knew I had an overdraft notice coming. And I came home, and it wasn't in the mail, and I knew it, and I went and I looked in the kitchen drawer, and it was in there. So I knew my mom had seen it.
And it was open already?
It was open already. And so I went out for her birthday, and then she came home that night, and she said, hey, I got an overdraft notice in the mail, but it's not where I put it, and she said, what's going on? Is everything okay? The most difficult words of my life,
Yes.
the most freeing words of my life,
Right.
where I just said no. And she looked at me, and I said, everything you're about to say to me, I already say to myself every day,
Yes.
I get like emotional thinking about it. And I told her that I was addicted to painkillers.
Wow.
And they had, instantly all the puzzle pieces came together.
Right.
Yeah,
in their mind, everything's going click, click,
yes,
click, click, click.
because
this is why, that's why.
Because we talk about denial as individuals, with substance use disorder.
But
But it's really a traumatic experience for the family as well,
yeah.
right? So you got to
Oh,
think
yeah.
when you're a family member, like, you know, for instance, myself too. But so when you're a family member and you have to live through trauma every day, right? So your
Yes.
brain develops a defense mechanism and creates its own denial. So
Right.
to, you know, so you become okay with what isn't okay, right? Or you believe what's unbelievable because your brain almost doesn't want you to live through the traumatic situation that's happening right now.
it's so crazy.
Right. So, you know, it all clicked into place afterwards. My family was so naive, you know, that I can't share it. Never mind. But anyways, you know, for instance, I was living with a long-term girlfriend, and she had some money in a drawer, and you know, I borrowed the money.
Yes.
Borrowed with
And,
quotations.
yeah, and
Permanently.
you know, she called me and she said, "Oh, you know, where's the money that was in the drawer?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, it's over. The walls are about to crash." And she was like, "I'll call you back. There's been construction workers in the house. Maybe it was them, you know."
And you're
And,
like,
and I'm like, "Yeah, it probably was, you know." And then I got off the phone and like we
Yeah,
never
that's
talked
it.
about it again, you know, or like, you know, but my life became like this walking tightrope where like I describe it as I was doing everything in my power to keep the walls up.
yeah, right.
While secretly begging for them to come crashing down.
I remember.
know?
I remember the feeling of impending doom. It's like a fear of the future. Every time I heard what the date was,
Yeah.
it would be like, you know,
Right.
oh, it's June 20th. Oh no,
Yeah.
you know, because I know that something's due or something's gonna happen.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
in the future is always bad.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh my God, what an awful way to
Uh,
live.
So when I you know, when I look back, if you put me right now into a day in that life that I was living, I would have a mental breakdown.
Oh.
I have no idea.
Like if
Wouldn't
I
be
have
able to
someone,
hack it.
I have
You
no idea.
I've heard it before. If someone else did to me what I
Oh,
did to
man.
me,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the things that my standard of living,
Oh yeah.
like the bar just kept getting lower and lower and lower.
Mhm.
And you know, from the sound of it, you fucking held it together pretty
Yeah.
well.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I did everything that comes with addiction.
right. But you managed to
but I
stay
managed
housed.
to keep it somewhat together, right?
Yeah.
So so it's funny. I worked in finance, right? So I
the
knew
most broke motherfucker working in finance.
I
you
knew
could
how
find.
I had a decent salary. I knew how to play the credit game.
Yeah.
So, you know, at the time I thought I was, you know, I had it mapped out. Like, you know, if I can take negative $800 out of this bank account, and it's 2 weeks before they close it. So for one day I put in $1, you know, to make it $1 positive, and then just let that day go by, and then I got another 2 weeks where I can empty it out again. Right? So my life became like, I was taking out credit cards, and then I was taking out loans out of my 401k to pay off the credit card, which would boost my credit score. And then, you know, I remember one time, like, I thought I was supposed to go skydiving, and my mom bought me this Groupon. And so, you know, the people I was going with were like, "Hey, just put it on your card and book it. We have like 1 day left to book it." You know, here I am. I'm like, book it with what? You know, I have negative $800 in both, and everything's maxed out. And I called my credit card to ask for $500 emergency increase that my car broke down, and they processed my information, and they're like, "Okay, you've been approved for a $5,000 increase." That is accessible. You can, you know, on a $4,800 cash advance line. And I literally had like I can't even describe what I felt.
Just
You
like
know what
a
I
little
mean?
kid jumping up and down.
But at the time, right, I thought I was getting one over and robbing everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm getting one over on these banks. I'm getting one over on these credit card companies. Coming to find out today, I was just really robbing my future self, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Exactly right.
Because now you're
I
trying
deal
to
with the
repair it.
consequences today.
Yeah, it's
You know, I've had my bank account emptied out by the bank. You know, they took money that I owed them at
I
the
was-
worst possible times, you know.
Always.
And,
Always.
I was a brilliant hustler.
yeah.
I would buy store brand stuff at one store, go to Brockton in Hanover, go to Brockton 3 towns over, and return that same store brand stuff and hand over on my credit card and return that same store for cash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was brilliant.
Yeah,
I was
so
a brilliant hustler.
I kept it all up on the outside by like extreme measures of like, you know, borrowing money. And I mean, I worked for 6 years in a career, didn't have $1 to show from my salary, right? Had negative 800 in 2 bank accounts. Got a repossession letter for my car. Didn't pay a single one of my student loans, and walked into the end of my journey with high double-digit credit card debt. You know, today that's a lot of that is solved thanks to recovery and support.
Right.
But yeah, I basically just robbed Future Mark.
Rob Peter to pay Paul.
To keep the secret going.
Yeah.
You know, and I got some help. I dove into a fellowship right away. I got a sponsor right away. I started working steps right away. I remember at 5 months clean, summer starts to come around. I start to have money in my pocket again. I don't need to go to as many meetings, right? I want to hang out with my friends. I had a long day of work. I don't want to go tonight. Started to make up every excuse in the book. And I remember I went to help a friend. He called me and said, I need to talk to you about some stuff I'm going through. So I pick him up. He says, can we get lunch? First words out of his mouth are, hey, I used, he's talking to me. He's like, tell me about your story a little bit, right? I heard you're in recovery now and stuff. I'm just giving him my whole deal, throwing it down, trying to help this kid.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, I just did a couple 30s. I hope you don't mind. So I'm like, all right, whatever, we go out to lunch. I should have ended the conversation, looking back, I was in no place to rescue anybody, but early recovery, we're going to save all our old friends.
Early recovery, they can get us using a lot quicker.
Oh, yeah.
Than get them
so we go out to lunch, he's having a couple drinks, and then I remember I was driving him home, and he was talking about how him and his girl used together, and I instantly got jealous. I was like, oh man, dude. I was jealous of how ignorant he was. Ignorance is bliss. Like I was jealous of how ignorant he was to how bad it was.
Oh yeah, right.
And it stuck with me. And I went to a meeting that night. I kind of told on myself, and I remember saying the exact words: 5 months and 3 weeks. I said, I don't know how anyone. I said, despite how that sounded appealing to me, I don't know how anyone who's been clean can make the decision to pick up again, right? And the morning of my 6 months, I got high by myself. I don't even know. I watched a movie of myself call the drug dealer. I watched a movie of myself drive to his house. So
it was like an
third
out-of-body
person
experience.
Oh yeah. I don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
I do know what happened. I stopped doing what I needed to do and stopped relying on the new coping
Now, while you were
mechanisms.
doing this, you were still doing the finance.
Yeah,
job.
so I was still in finance.
Yeah.
So I picked up, and this was actually one of the most important parts of my recovery because I didn't use with that. No one knew. And I woke up that morning.
You didn't get caught again.
I didn't get caught. And I looked in the mirror, though, and I was like, I was upset, and I was crying, and I was praying. My family bought me a 6-month congratulations cake that we were going to have that night, right? And I'm like, I can't do this to my family. We finally have, like, some peace in our life again after Dad passed away. But then in that moment, I said, I'm not doing this to make my mom happy. I'm not doing this to get everyone else off my back.
Right.
I'm doing this because I don't want to die.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I went upstairs and I woke my girlfriend at the time up, and I told her what happened. And I called my mom and I told her. And I went to a meeting and I got a white key tag. And I told them. And
good decisions.
But
those are the good decisions.
Right? So 30 days goes by. Don't change anything. You were saying it a little earlier, but there's, in the basic text, it says, a relapse without catastrophic consequences is one of the worst things that can happen to an addict, right? Because 30 days later, I was like, whoa, the walls didn't cave in, right? My life didn't fall apart. I used once, and I stopped.
It's so insidious. Isn't
so
it?
Insidious.
We can lie to ourselves so easy, and it's just like, maybe it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
The bullshit that we'll tell ourselves,
Oh yeah.
or that our habit self.
Yeah.
Habit self.
You know,
Yeah.
we used to have those meetings.
So my girlfriend at the time went on vacation, and I was like, hey, I got sick last time. I didn't really enjoy it. And I was like, I can do this one more time and just not tell anybody. Used one more time. Hated the fact that I did it. Was instantly upset, and couldn't stop. I just kept doing it.
Ugh.
So one day turned into, well, we can do a week. We earned this, right? You've stopped before, you can stop again, which is the trap that a lot of people fall into with
Yeah.
relapse.
Fuck yeah.
The danger of
Door doesn't
false
always
confidence.
swing
Yeah.
both ways.
And then months went by, and everything I had worked for was gone. All the money I fixed was gone. But I always say, it's always worth it, right? So I hate the phrase that I threw away 6 months, or I threw away 3 years.
No.
I hate it.
You have to change your date.
All it is a new date,
Yeah.
right? So
'Cause
those
you
6
don't
months,
forget that
No,
stuff that you
was
learned,
the most important
the
part.
things that you went through.
So, first off, outside perspective, I would take, despite my dad's failures, any small periods of my dad back in my life, clean and sober, were the best memories that I have,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
always worth it.
Right.
So that 6 months, first off, was better than 6 months of straight using. I was a lot happier.
Yeah, right.
But it gave me is I woke up one day. I hated my life. I hated myself. I hated the fact that my dad was gone. Back to poor Mark, poor me. If anyone else went through what I went through, like I got it this bad. And then I literally woke up and I was like, dude, 4 months ago, life was good. 4 months ago, I had acceptance with my father passing.
Yep.
4 months ago, I woke up and just said thank you for waking up. 4 months ago, I was happy with simple things in my life.
There you go.
And here I am, back the complete opposite. And there's one thing that changed, right? And it was the fact that I was using drugs again.
Yeah.
And that black and white comparison gave me the ability to speak up and get some help again.
Yeah, that's a good point. The comparison, the stark difference
Yeah.
between, and you were using, and then you were sober, and then you were using again.
Yep.
So it's a stark difference comparison.
Yeah.
And I think that also the thing is you have to grow a respect for the strength of the power of the addiction.
Oh yeah.
To control you.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know? First of all, you have to realize it sucks, and then you gotta accept that it sucks.
Yep.
And then you gotta realize how strong it is.
Yes.
That it'll take you away again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
Suck you right back in.
So that gave me a big, today a healthy fear, right? I realized how a crack can turn into a crater real quick, with
That's right.
recovery.
That's the one healthy fear.
Yeah.
And I've
Oh,
been
yeah.
told before that there is no such thing as healthy fear. The opposite of fear is faith, blah, blah, blah. Well, call it what you will, but you got to realize that addiction is a strong and powerful
Oh, yeah.
force that will take you away from who you are now and what your life is now.
Absolutely.
Um,
Quickly too.
Oh, yeah.
And
Quick.
you're like, what the?
Holy
How the hell did I get here?
Yeah, I don't even know what 4 months was gone, and I didn't even know what happened. And my family didn't either. And shout out to my grandmother. Right, she came over for dinner one day. Your family's used to you seeing you every day. They see like small. They don't notice changes over a period of time, right? And I walk in the room. My grandmother goes, "What the hell is wrong with you? Like, why are you
Nana
so,
hitting you
why
with
are
the
you
truth."
why are you so pale and sick?" And I was like, "Oh, I work a lot. I'm not out in the sun." And I just saw everyone's eyes in the room look at me, and I was like, "Oh, there goes that." You know what I mean?
Nana dropping some truth on you.
You
You look like shit, boy.
But I got up and I explained again what was going on. And this time I went to Cape Cod. I went to Gosnold.
Yeah.
The same place that my father had spent some time. The woman I called for help was my father's counselor, and she was my counselor in the detox. If you asked me when I went down there, I was doing a detox and I was coming back home.
But
right?
imagine how this woman feels.
Yep.
She helps your dad.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And then now, here's his son
Yep.
Yeah.
calling. Like,
Yep.
that's gotta fuck with some people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like
Yep.
that would like it gives me a resentment towards
Yeah.
this disease. You
Oh,
know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like how it can just generationally fucking
Oh,
wipe
yeah.
out a whole. You know.
Well, that's a big thing I always talk about, right? Is so much so that this is about, when you're in 12-step fellowships and stuff, it's about you being clean and sober, right? But like today I'm doing my part to like end the cycle of addiction, like the family cycle that goes on.
Here you go.
Because I want to be a dad,
Yeah,
and I
Such a
want to
beautiful
be.
thing. It's something to
Yes,
be proud of.
and
Yeah.
it all started with where you went
Yep.
to treatment.
So I go to treatment, right? This woman's my counselor. I'm like, I'm going home. They convinced me to go on to a 28-day program, Gosnell. It's Katamit. I'm like, don't even talk to me about aftercare. I'm going home.
I've been down to Katana.
Somewhere along the line, they convinced me to go on to the Miller House. I'm like, all right, here we go. I go on to the Miller House.
So you had some type of willingness.
Yeah, right? So
Even if it's a mustard seed.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I had a bunch of weird, honestly, experiences at Katamit. I was now in the room doing like family meetings at the same rooms that I did family meetings with my father. I had a lot of patients that I met while visiting my father were in there. And
Really?
a lot of the staff
working
and as patients.
really again.
Like I remember a story. I was in a room and I'm like, oh, I'm Mark, I'm an addict, and someone interrupts. They go, hey, remember that guy that we were here with where he used to say, I'm Mark, and we would all go, Mark, because he had this wicked Boston accent.
That was your dad.
And the other kid replies, he goes, that was his dad, And so I had all these weird experiences.
That'll get you right there.
It started to really like
God shots
sink in a little bit. Yeah. And, I remember, right, what really got me at Katamit was my dad has this, his saying is never, never, never give up, right? So we had this plaque in our house growing up that says never, never, never give up. One day I was having a hard time and I wanted to leave. My counselor called me in the room and she said, what would your dad say to you right now? And I said, he'd tell me to never, never, never give up, right? So I leave that meeting. I feel a little better. She asks for a follow-up the next day. I walk in. She's like, how you feeling? I look to the left, and there's a plaque on the wall that says, never, never, never give up. And I said, was that there? And she's like, I thought you knew that was there. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Right?
Yeah.
And, but like in that moment, I felt like, I was supposed to see it.
Yeah.
And,
That
I
was
don't believe in
your dad.
coincidences, right? And,
yeah.
so anyways, they convinced me to go on to Miller House. You asked me. I was leaving after 4 weeks and going home. I literally said the words, don't talk to me about a sober house. 4 weeks go by. Here I am asking for 2 more weeks, right? So I did 6 weeks at the Miller House. And then I'm telling everyone I'm going home. My sponsors yelling at me. All my counselors are like, dude, stop. I'm like, I got to go back to my family. They need me, They're like, stop. You've already done this. You went home before. Like, you went back to work. And I said, all right, I'll go to a sober house. For the day I was leaving, I called a sober house and asked if I could move in. I was like, I'll live there for 2 weeks just to adjust, right? I went to all my meetings. I said goodbye to everybody. And the next day I woke up and I was like, what the hell am I doing? I'm not going anywhere, right? And I've been on Cape Cod ever since, So after that, I started to work a program. I was out on leave from work. My leave was up. And I was like, I'm not going back. My family's like, no, you're going back, right? So you have financial ruin, first off.
Yeah.
Second off, you went to college for an economics degree. You've worked 6 years in this career. Like, you got to go back. You're not throwing it away. And my aunt called me, and she's a successful woman. And she says, Mark, if you want to succeed in life, you have to walk through anxiety and fear, right? And so I said, I'll do it one day. And that advice was the advice that I needed, but it didn't go the way they thought it was going to go. I got up despite anxiety of fear. I was at work. I worked for a half day, and I was around the bathrooms I used to use in. I was around the people I used to use with. I bought drugs at work. I used all over downtown Crossing, and I felt like using. And I got up, and I walked out, and I called HR, and I resigned. And I went back down to Cape Cod, and emptied out my 401k to try and survive off some money for a little while.
I think sometimes that all those things, all that money and future and and what about retirement and
Mhm.
all these? It's too big.
Too big.
It's too big for early recovery.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like, just let that be
Oh,
for
yeah.
a while.
Mhm.
That's what I had to do.
Well, so I did it before. I went back to work,
Right.
right? And it worked for 6 months, and I had nothing to show for it, right?
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes. And I took a job. I applied as a recovery aide at the Miller House, making a fraction of what I used to make, and but I felt a part of, right? I wanted.
And you felt safe.
I felt safe, and I was working in recovery, and I was able to do for others what people did for me,
Yeah.
right? And the kick is, though, that right when I applied, my father's counselor became the program director. Right, this woman, Martha Jackstimer. So the same woman that I called for help was now the program director of the Miller House. And I was walking with her.
Give up.
Right? And so I walk in, we're working together, right? And she pulls me into her office, and she's got a picture of my dad and my family on her wall. And she says,
Wow.
your dad was my favorite patient.
Wow.
She came to my father's funeral and stuff. And now here I am working with her, right? And time goes by, and I ended up becoming the assistant program director, running the Miller House with her, with Martha. I went on at some point along the way.
2 weeks. I'll
Yeah.
do 2 weeks.
Somewhere along the way, I went on to run a sober house. It was the same sober house I used to visit my dad at. So I've had a lot of spiritual.
Little
connection
did you
to
know.
people. Little did I know
That all of these places that your dad
Yeah.
had journeyed through
Oh yeah.
that this would become your journey.
I know. I used to,
that's fucking
it's wild.
mind
cool.
blowing.
I'm a
Yeah.
sap too, dude. If you ask anyone on Cape Cod, they take bets on how long it is before I start crying when I'm sharing at a meeting, right?
Dude,
2
years.
Most
Like
bets
2
are
years.
under a minute.
Yeah, right.
But I have such a connection with that stuff. I used to sit out on the porch and be like, my dad sat here, and I live on the same street of the sober house that my father used to live on. I'm a weirdo. I'm out touching the pavement at night, oh, my dad used to drive down this road, But it's such a connection for me, and
You need to feel.
my
all those
father was
feelings.
everywhere in my recovery. He's with me every day.
That's awesome. man. That's awesome.
Good stuff.
And it used to be right, but the kick is that I went on to do all these things, but early in recovery it was poor me and poor Mark that my dad passed away, right? And today, honestly, I have so much early recovery, right? You start to think what acceptance and faith and spirituality is.
Yeah, right.
Then 6 months you think you have an idea. Then you get to a year and you're like, I knew nothing back then, right? Then you're at 2 years,
Ever evolving,
and you're
ever
like, what the
changing.
hell? This is real acceptance and spirituality, and it just keeps going, right?
Keeps evolving.
But I used to think of all the what ifs and all that. Today, where I am today, the happiest and most satisfied and fulfilled I've ever been in my entire life is a direct result of everything good or bad I've ever been through or done in my life. Right?
Exactly.
Up into
right.
and including the loss of my father. If I had the ability to go back and change it, I wouldn't.
Right.
Because it defines who I am today, and it brought me to be the most happy and fulfilled.
You had to go through
I had to go
everything you
through
had
it to
to
be
go
where
through.
I am.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so now you go on from the Miller House.
Yep.
And
So I work at the Miller House, for a few years. June last year, I got offered a position at South Shore Peer Recovery. And South Shore Peer Recovery is really a community recovery center. So I had worked in treatment long enough that treatment works, right? But so people do great in a structured treatment environment.
Yeah.
They walk out the door, and it's 50, up in the air. Life hits
Exactly.
you, right? Life shows up. So people who get integrated into communities, sober living, networks, fellowships, they do great.
Yeah. And that was part of the treatment center we went through.
Yeah.
You could stay plugged into the house. You had to come back.
Oh yeah.
Once
same.
once a week.
Yeah.
It was called. What was it called?
Transitions.
Yeah, transitions.
Re-entry
you could
group.
stay in the house
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
become
awesome.
and become it became a sober house
Yep.
for you, but you could come and go as
Yeah.
you pleased. It was very important. I think.
So I had, I stayed in Falmouth, so I got to stay with the network that I made while I was in the Miller House, the people I met. I lived in sober living for, a year and a half. But so I go on. So social peer recovery is really about continuing the continuum of care, extending it, right?
Yes.
So we have a pre-built community for you when you come back to your community, right? So when you come back to the South Shore, you can walk into it's a storefront property. A big sign that says South Shore Peer Recovery. It's essentially a beacon that says like, hey, if you want to walk into a group of people where you can feel comfortable and accepted and have a pre-built network for you and a pre-built support structure, we're here.
And
right?
you guys do everything over there.
Yeah, so we got groups that go on every day of the week. Everything we do is free. We try to be more than run-of-the-mill recovery center. We try and focus a lot on family as well.
Yeah.
We have sober parenting journey groups, these 14-week programs for parents in recovery. We have a support group, family support group on the weekends that we partnership with Gosnold. And now we have a new group called CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. It's really to support family members of loved ones struggling with active addiction.
And don't you guys have a program that, like, if someone wants you guys to call them?
Yep. So one of our newer programs is telephone recovery supports. So the idea is essentially that you can sign up and we'll call you on a weekly basis and check in. Right. So you have someone in recovery, a peer with lived experience, give you a call to check in. Are there any resources you need? Is there any anyone I can connect you with? Do you have any questions? 90% of the time, though, we're talking about a 20-minute meeting on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's cool because it gives people the opportunity, right? You're in treatment. I've seen it a million times. Me too. I've done it. But I'm all good. I don't need anything. I don't need a counselor. I don't need this, X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah,
you walk out the door 4 days later, you're like, well, maybe I should have listened to some of the suggestions they had.
Right.
And got a counselor and moved to a sober house and got my license and done all this stuff, right? But now you have the ability to sign up while you're in treatment. You fill out this little form. They fax it to us at South Shore Peer Recovery. So that's all you do, right? So no doing of yourself. No, it doesn't take any effort. You don't got to pick up you don't got to make a call. You don't got to go to a counseling center. You don't got to go on a website. You walk out of that treatment facility, and within a week, you're going to get a call from someone in recovery checking in on how things are going. And if you're struggling, we'll help people get back into treatment. We'll answer any questions. We'll connect people. So we're trying to take away the geographic border, of being in Scituate. And we got a lot of great feedback about it. And, our people love doing it.
Yeah.
It becomes a way for people to give back and to help other people and stay connected in recovery.
And, basically the centers run on volunteers.
Oh, yeah. We have 2 full-time staff and a part-time staff member. And besides that, it's all volunteers.
How many was it?
It was around 85 volunteers, 85 active volunteers that we have.
That's awesome.
We just had a volunteer appreciation dinner last week, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it was.
And Chris was there. And
I was a +1.
What we really have is even in our volunteers alone, we have an amazing community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
So I was just talking about today, I was at a meeting with board members. But if all we did was what we do right, which isn't the plan, but if all we did was what we have right now, then this is a huge success.
Absolutely.
Because it's really become like a family for people and such a community.
Yep.
Scituate is awesome to us. We have our Recovery Rocks fundraiser that comes up August 22nd.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Nice.
Which is an amazing night. We have live music. It turns into a taste of the town. We're half funded by a federal grant. The other half is all private donations.
Absolutely.
The South Shore has been amazing to us. They give we offer everything free. It's free for everyone who uses it. It's not free to offer, but we have such support and such community support that we're able to make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have acupuncture.
Yep.
There's yoga.
Yeah, so we got all pathways, right? So we got meditation. We support, I always say, if someone came and told me that flying a kite helps them stay in recovery, I'd help them find the best kite maker and the best spots to fly that kite.
Yeah, right.
So we got meditation. We have a women's discussion group. We got detox acupuncture, which is also a meditation. People love it.
Yeah, I haven't been able to get over there. I have to.
One session, and now we have to have 2 because it got so popular.
Yeah.
Thursday nights, we have a spirituality discussion group, Faith Finders.
Yep.
Saturdays, we got War.
Yep.
We Are Recovered. It's a group based on the 12 steps. We've done AWOLs. We have we also try and balance fun. So we got sober softball that goes on Sundays.
Every Sunday.
I've
been there.
Everything's drop in, right? Besides, some of our sober parenting and craft require pre-registration, but they're all free. We do fun one-off events. We helped, a group called Comics for a Cause put on a comedy show to support us, right? But how cool is that a Saturday night in Scituate, we had a place sold out at 150 tickets and no alcohol was involved.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Recovery Rocks last year, we sold out at 350 tickets. It was a concert, and not an ounce of alcohol was involved.
Right.
And people had the night of their life.
Yep.
Right. It was a blast.
Yeah. So it was over at Bowman Marine.
Yeah, Bowman Marine. So last year we sold out like a month and a half early. Right.
Yeah.
So this year we increased the tickets to 500. But I highly suggest, if you're interested in coming, that you actually get on and buy a ticket as soon as possible. You can do it on our website, southshorepairrecovery.com.
Yep.
It's a blast. Like I said, there's food trucks that line the lot. We got a big show that goes on all night. We got a small program we put on. But it's an amazing thing when, you have 300 plus people showed up last year.
Yeah.
And it's cool because half of which probably weren't in recovery. Right. So it's an amazing thing that you get people together. And that's what's also great about a lot of our groups, right? Acupuncture, what we do doesn't require you to be in recovery.
Yeah.
Right?
Most of the stuff there isn't.
Yeah. So we have
It's like
family members.
all welcoming community.
Or, just we call them allies in recovery.
Yeah.
So we do our part in ending the stigma and educating a little bit by just, you come to an acupuncture group and, you're an individual that's not affected by the disease. But you're sitting in a room, and who's who, right?
Right.
So am I laughing with somebody who is in recovery? Am I laughing with somebody who isn't?
Right.
And it really helps, but it helps to break those walls.
Yeah, and even war on Saturdays, anyone's welcome.
Oh yeah. So it's
Right.
it brings people together, and
Yes,
a huge part today with the stigma and stuff is that people don't talk to each other.
Right. Or there's pre-judgment.
Yes.
Like people think, they did heroin or they did painkillers, like they're losers, and then they meet someone and like I've had people say, I share, what I did to get what I needed to get, and they're looking at me and they're like, I can't even picture you doing that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Crazy. Like even to the point where a CO that was watching me in jail, like pulled me aside and was like, dude, I read your jacket. He's like, the way I watch you operate down here, I can't see you doing this
right.
shit.
It's like
what happened?
5 years ago, you wouldn't want to be sitting next to me in a room.
know.
You know what I
So
mean?
crazy.
It's crazy.
So,
So
South Shore Peer Recovery
Yeah.
in Scituate, southshorepeerrecovery.com. Recovery Rocks, August 22nd.
Yep.
At Bowman Marina in Scituate. What else?
So we're about to launch a new. If anyone is aware of any parents of individuals struggling with addiction, we have a new craft group coming up. It launches July 8th. So call the center or go to our website if you're interested in joining. There's limited spaces, but it's an amazing evidence-based program to support family members. To better take care of themselves, reduce their loved ones using, and to help them get into treatment. Recovery Rocks.
Nice.
That's our big push right now. If you're involved in our community at all or interested in getting involved, and you check out our Facebook, we have what we really try and do is take peer input and community input into all the decisions we make. So we have a program survey that's out right now.
Yes.
So if you're involved at South Shore Peer Recovery or in the surrounding communities and would like to see South Shore Peer Recovery have a specific group that would draw you to us, I highly encourage you to go on our Facebook, check out that program survey and fill it out, because that literally drives the groups that we host at our center. We're not just coming up with what we think the community needs.
No, it's
what we
what the
think would
community's
work.
asking
it's
for.
really what the community's asking for.
Nice.
All right.
good
So thank
stuff.
you. I'm glad we finally
Thanks,
worked
Mark.
out this
Yeah.
whole sound thing. I don't think it was us. I
I don't think it was us either.
I think it was Facebook.
Yeah.
So, all right.
All
That's
right.
Thanks for having me.
that's a wrap.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark. Please subscribe, LOLTerms.com.
you. Like, subscribe, share, do all the good